Hey, vinyl community, Elliot here, Lazy Dogs Records, and I'm down here in the basement with my faithful dog Chester over to my side. And I thought I'd do a video about selling at a record show or a record fair, whatever you want to call it. I did so for the first time a few days ago, Sunday to be exact, and had a wonderful experience in doing it. So I thought I would tell you a little bit about it. Some of you may that haven't ever sold may find this interesting, and some of you that have may compare your experience to mine. And if you'd, I welcome you to leave comments down below. And I'd love to hear feedback. I'd love to hear suggestions. I'd love to hear a little about what you experienced as well. And so here we go. First of all, why sell at a record show? Well, for one thing, if you're culling your collection, going to a brick and mortar store with a big stack of records, you're not going to get a lot of money for those records. You might get credits for things you buy, but they're not going to give you a lot of cash for used records compared to their worth. Why? Because they've got to turn around and resell them, and they have things like rent and electric bills and employees they have to pay and everything else. So it's just not a way to get a lot of money back for your records. So if you go to a record show and sell, you've got some expenses, but no great expense. A day of your time, and the cost of renting a booth or a table at a record show, and that's pretty much what it's going to cost you. So I had to come to the acceptance that I can't keep everything. When I first started collecting records, it was all about, I got to have this, I got to have this, and if I don't buy this right now, I may never see it again. And as time has passed, I've changed my outlook considerably. It's not like the old bumper sticker. You remember the old bumper sticker that said, the one that dies with the most toys wins, and a picture of a boat or something like that on it. That's not it, really. That's not it. Now, I do think of my collection as kind of a library of music. So when I'm in the mood for something, I can go and have a pretty good selection to pick from for whatever I'm in the mood for. But the truth is, you can't keep everything. So I came to that realization, the acceptance of that, and I've got a lot of duplicates as I've searched for a better playing copy of a certain album. For instance, I think I've got 4 or 5 Allman Brothers and Sisters, my favorite, maybe my favorite album of all time. I don't need but one of those, so why not sell the other 3 or 4? Certain artists, I don't have to have everything they ever did, no matter how much I really like them, because what I came to the realization was, when I go to the collection and I say I want to listen to this particular an album from this particular artist, there's maybe 2-3 albums that I'll pick from every time, and the other 7 or 10 or however many albums that artist produced, I'm just not going to pull those. Does that make sense? So that's the way my thinking has evolved over time. And another aspect of it is, I can sell this record now, and if I ever really want it again, it's not that I'll never see it again. I can pick it up later, at the record show. I can go looking for it, and maybe I regret that I got rid of that record. I can find it again. 99% of the time, I can find it again. So part of getting ready for the record show is that mental the outlook on record collecting that you need to have to sell at a record show. And the other part is getting it all together. and that is takes some time. I spent about a week and a half getting ready for this record show. I pulled records from my collection and that I was going to be willing to part with. A lot of it was classic rock stuff that I just don't listen to much anymore. But there was some jazz, there was some country, there's some Americana, and some blues that I pulled, and then coming up with a good fair price. And you can't just go to Discogs and look at the median price. And you can't go and just look at some of the copies that are for sale there, because it in some cases everybody's asking a whole lot for a particular record. But if you go look at the history, nobody's paying that much for them. People are overpricing and they're sitting there. You also have to pay attention to condition. Is it if you just look at the median price, that factors in everything from fair plus to near mint. So if you deem a record to be very good plus, you need to click on that particular issue pressing and that specific condition. See what they're selling for and see if they're selling very often, and that'll indicate whether that price is pretty good. And then you're at a record show. People want to get deals, rightly so. People want to bargain, okay? So you need to price the records where there's some wiggle room. So coming up with a price, if it's a less than $20 record, I need to leave about $2 or $3 wiggle room there. If it's a more expensive record, $25, $30, $40, then maybe more like $4 or $5 with wiggle room. So that somebody buys a bunch of records, you don't want to sell them. Okay, I got this stack of records. It totals $110. What can you do for me with this one? And you want to be able to say, okay, $110. I can let you have those for $100, or I can let you have those I'll sell them to you for $95, or something like that. So you want to do that. You're not in it to be greedy. Don't be greedy. I think this is one thing I think we need to remember there. Don't be greedy. If you overprice your records, you're just going to sit there all day. Nobody's going to buy them because there's somebody across the room that is selling the record you want $28 for. They're selling it for $14. So you can't overprice. If you underprice, then the other dealers before the show starts will come in and they'll buy up everything you got and go to their table and mark it up and sell it. So there's a happy medium you need to reach there. So getting everything in boxes, getting everything in order, alphabetical order, by genre, so that people can thumb through and not waste their time. If they're looking for jazz, you don't want them to have to go through all your rock and country records just to find a few jazz records scattered in there. You don't want to be able to go to the jazz section and thumb through there, and vice versa for anything else. So getting them ready in that sense, pricing them. And so I had about 250 records in boxes from my personal collection, somewhere between 220 and 250, somewhere in there. And then I had 4 boxes of records that, and my records that, of course, that I came from my personal private collection. Had all been play graded. They were all in inner and outer sleeves, and so on and so forth. And then I had 4 more boxes of about the same amount of records that I had either picked up crate digging, or when I bought somebody's collection, or I went to another seller I know that has many more records than I do, and he has multiple copies of lots and lots of records. So he sells them at to me at a very reasonable price, and so I got a bunch of those. Classic rock, almost all classic rock, and a little bit of countries, all those records, and I marked those at $8, but with the wiggle room of somewhere between $6 and $8, depending on how many you bought, that sort of thing, that I would sell. Then I had 4 boxes of records. I have a table at a vintage shop in town that I've had for about 5 years, and I had records that were just sitting there. I had marked them down, and they still weren't moving. 60s rock usually, and other stuff like Dan Fogelberg, Seals and Croft, good music in good condition, but just not nearly as much demand for them. So I pulled a bunch of those records from my vintage shop table and put them out for $2, and with deals on when you bought 20, 30 records, something like that. So they're on the floor in front of the table for people to get down there. I was concerned that it could clog up the area and people that might be looking for more expensive records wouldn't be able to get to it. But that was not did not become a concern, because very few people bent down there and went through those records. I only sold like 6 or 7 records from the $2 bins. So I'll lesson learned. I'm not going to sell the really cheap records, because the effort it takes to get those records there and put them out versus the amount of records that I could sell like that just doesn't seem to be worth it to me. I'm better off having a little bit more expensive records and keep everything on the table. Don't put stuff on the floor, because it takes a lot of $2 records to add up to much of anything. So I won't do that again. That was one lesson learned. Got up. I packed the car, the SUV, the night before, so I only have to do 3 load-ins or outs on Sunday, the day I went to the show. So I packed it late at night so that the heat wouldn't bother the records. It gotten pretty mild overnight. 7 o'clock, I'm able to pull out. Takes me almost right at an hour to get to the venue, which is a Hampton Inn, one of the conference rooms in a Hampton Inn in Raleigh, and I get there, get set up, and for the first up until 10 o'clock, so I was set up by 8:30. For the first hour and a half, the dealers mill around, and sometimes they'll buy stuff they see from you. I sold a pretty good number of records just from fellow dealers that were looking on before the show started. Now, here's some advice for you if you're a buyer at record shows. If they say that the record show starts at 10 o'clock, the people selling are going to be in place an hour or more before that. And there's not going to be somebody at the door saying, wait, you can't come in, you're the general public. You pretty much, I'm sure it could vary from venue to venue. There may be some place to keep the doors locked. But it's been my experience that if you get there early, before it officially opens, you can go right on in and start looking around and shopping around, and you might find some things that otherwise would have gotten gobbled up before you could get to them. So bear in mind that you can do that. Let's see. So it officially starts at 10 o'clock. I will say that the best thing about the record show was the camaraderie, the conversations, the meeting new people that share your same joy in collecting records and music. So I had great conversations with all the other dealers. Were very nice and very encouraging to me. Some of them came over toward the end of the day and asked me how it went, how was my experience. They congratulated me and encouraged me to come back and do this all again. So that was great. And once the general public is flowing through, this thing was supposed to go from 10 to 4, by 2:30, people were a lot of the sellers were packing up. Nobody was coming in anymore, hardly. Very few people coming in, and that's about so it was pretty much done by then. I sold maybe 3 or 4 records between 2:30 and 3:45. I packed up and I was leaving the parking lot at 4 o'clock, as pretty much everybody else was, and or everybody else. One of the last ones out, actually. And just as it was so much fun to meet and socialize with the other dealers, it was a lot of fun just interacting with people looking for records. I had great conversations. There was one guy that was into the same roots music that I was. He's a big Billy Strings fan. He told me about a couple of artists I ought to check out I wasn't familiar with. I recommended some old bluegrass artists that were really good that he wasn't familiar with, and we had a great little conversation there at the table. There was a lady there with this accent that I thought was just wonderful, and I would have guessed it, but she somehow mentioned she was from Miami, and I said, that was it. She sounded like I guess it was a Cuban American accent. Very, very cool. There was just an abundance of really nice people shopping for records, and whether they bought anything from me or not, I enjoyed meeting them and interacting with them. And I hope I didn't talk anybody's ear off. And if you're familiar with me, the vinyl community, you know that can happen. The guy selling beside me, I talked about other people buying some of my records before the show. The guy selling in the table beside me, great guy, a guy named Todd Transplant from Pennsylvania, moved down here a few months ago. He just had several boxes of records, just like I did, selling some of his collection, and he and I had some great conversations throughout the day. Got to know each other. We're trying to keep in touch. Hopefully, he'll be at the next record show I do, and he sold me. I ended up buying a bunch of records from him, and he bought some records from me as well. He had a lot of old recorded, not old pressings necessarily, but a bunch of old jazz and some folk music that I was interested in. I'm not going to. This is not going to be a record showing video, but I will show you a little bit of what I got from one of them that I got from him, Sidney Blanchette. This is it's called Blue Note Volume 1 with Wild Bill Davidson and Art Hodge, and I got Volume 1 and Volume 2 from him from another dealer. I got some old time music, fiddling John Carson. This is called The Old Hen Cackled and the Rooster's Gonna Crow. Fiddling John Carson. Tell you some stories about him sometime, maybe in a video. Gid Tanner and the Skillet Lickers. And this album is called The Kickapoo Medicine Show. And again, old time string band music. Riley Puckett, great guitar player. There's Riley, blind man, great guitar player. He just threw this one in, my neighbor there, Todd. He just threw this 10-inch, which means 33 1/3, which means it was probably 1955, somewhere in there, recording on Columbia. Louis Armstrong plays W.C. Handy, Volume 1. Some Zydeco, Queen Ida and her Zydeco band in San Francisco. Ben Webster and Sweets Edison. It's also got Hank Jones on her, George DeVera and Clarence Johnson. A nice price. I didn't know they did nice price for jazz stuff. And I won't go through all of them, but that's a sampling of some of the records I got. So other advice, Be careful when you go to a record show to sell that you don't end up buying more records than you sell. I didn't. I ended up buying 29 records, I believe, and I think I counted up, give or take one or two. I sold 65 records at the show. Not bad. I didn't think. It was fairly well attended, but it wasn't an overflow crowd, and it wasn't an overabundance of sellers. Some months when they come, sometimes when they come through there, it's more crowded. It was a hot day. It was 90-something degrees outside, and so I'm sure there were some people that might have been interested, but they said just too hot to get out today, and so they stay back. Same thing with some of the dealers. I don't want to haul that stuff in and haul it back out in the 90-degree temperatures. So that was some of the highlights of my day at the record show. Some of the things I would recommend. Another thing I would recommend, and then Mazzy actually suggested this to me, and I took his suggestion. He said Venmo. He said download the Venmo app and then print up that scan thing that you hold your camera over. And I did. I printed up a couple copies, and I put on there cash or Venmo. And I ended up making about 3 or 4 of my sales were Venmo sales. Chester's chewing on his bone if you hear something that sounds strange. Venmo. So it was worth it to download. It was simple enough to download. I don't like technology like that, but you got to at least go with the times a little bit. So it paid off to do that. So I would recommend that. I would plan on doing just cash only. The highlights of the trip were my daughter and grandson arrived an hour or two after it opened, and spent the rest of the day with me, the rest of the afternoon with me. So that was a joy to have my grandson and my daughter with me doing that. And as I said, the people I met, so many interesting people, so many nice people. So it was a success because I had fun, and I didn't lose money, and I made, I wouldn't say I made money, but I covered all my expenses and had a little walking around money to go in my pocket when all was said and done. Now there was something else. If you're going to do a record show, check with whoever's sponsoring it and see if you need to bring a table. I hauled a table and a bar stool all the way up there from home. Crammed it into that SUV with all those boxes, and it turned out that was all provided by the venue. It was at the Hampton Inn, and the Hampton Inn had the table set up, had chairs there for you, and so I didn't have to do all that, so that was something. As I said, the highlight was my daughter and grandson, but interesting, a young man walks up right at the very end, and I said, can I help you find anything in particular? And he said, you got any folk music? And it struck me, it was about a 30-year-old kid. I call him a kid because I'm twice his age. 30-year-old kid or so, and I thought that was great that he was interested in folk music. And so I didn't bring any because you never know what people want. And you think people won't want anything like a certain artist or genre, and then when you don't bring it, they start asking you about it. So I didn't have any folk music, and or much of anything, and nothing he was looking for. And but we had a wonderful conversation. Turns out his family, he had family members in the past that had been in the folk music scene in the 60s. They were, he is of Gullah or Geechee descent, the Sea Islands of mostly of South Carolina. We just had a wonderful conversation. Like I say, he had background in preserving his culture. His family members had been preserving his culture, and he also had several family members that were on the black gospel music circuit, national circuit, back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, which was so cool. And a couple of them, he said that they were in the North Carolina Music Hall of Fame, the gospel groups that they were a part of were in the Hall of Fame there. Had a great conversation with him, such an interesting background, and my daughter was there with me, and it turns out that this shows you how 6 degrees of separation, right? An old boyfriend of my daughter was from the same town that he grew up in, and they knew each other. Her old boyfriend and he, and she used to spend time in that town when they were dating, and they had some mutual friends. So it's just such a small world. And they graduated from the same university. He was 2 or 3 years ahead of her. I really enjoyed it. And anybody that wants to try selling at a record show, I highly recommend it. I will be doing it again. So that concludes my little video. Folks, remember, be kind to your neighbors, because we're all neighbors.